Welcome. We are in the middle of a study called A Man After God's Own Heart, the Life of David in the Bible. And today we're finishing the book of First Samuel 31. And this is going to be an interesting story given our topic because David isn't even mentioned in this chapter, best I can remember. But I'm 99% sure David isn't even mentioned here. There's only 13 short verses, and it's the end of the book of First Samuel. But we're going to see the deaths of Saul and Jonathan. Spoiler alert, I guess I should have said. You say, well, why would we talk about Saul and Jonathan's death if it doesn't involve David? And the reason is because it does greatly involve David. If you remember, just a few chapters back in chapter 27, David had resigned himself to the fact that he would die one day by the hand of Saul. And that's just not true. He's not going to die by the hand of Saul. In fact, we're going to see Saul dies in this chapter. So if you're able to look in your Bibles with me, I encourage you to turn there. And we're going to read through this chapter, and probably not a lot of conversation about it. We'll just get the meat of it and understand where we are once chapter 1 of 2 Samuel begins. So 1 Samuel 31, verse number 1, Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. So the Philistines are getting the best of the Israelites in this particular battle. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's sons. So the Philistines set out intentionally and deliberately to pursue the king and his boys, and they're going to wipe them out. Now, that can also be the hand of God at play, because Saul is the king of Israel, and God is done with Saul. Saul rebelled against God, and he sinned in the eyes of God, and so God told him, I'm going to remove you from the throne. And then Saul's sons dying means he has no heir to the throne, and David is going to be able to take the throne. Even if that means the death of Jonathan, David's best friend in the whole world, and a godly man and a helpful man. So here we see the three sons of Saul are killed in verse number 2, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. Verse 3, And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. So Saul takes an arrow to the body, and it's pretty much a mortal wound. It's going to take his life in time. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, the young man that would accompany the king, Saul, to have at the ready his armor and his weaponry and so forth, Draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. So Saul tells his armor-bearer, look, end this for me. Run your sword through me. I don't want the Philistines to get me and get my body and abuse it. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. So the armor-bearer says, King, I understand where you're coming from, but I can't do that. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. So Saul falls on his own sword so that the enemy doesn't have the privilege of taking his life. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if that was something that was traditionally done or expected to be done. The armor-bearer perhaps had a responsibility to the king, and he felt like he failed the king, and so he takes his own life. Not exactly sure there. Maybe he was just afraid because he didn't run Saul through. I'm not sure. Nonetheless, he's dead too. So Saul died, and his three sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men that same day together. So the entire legacy of Saul, he, his three sons, his armor-bearer, and all of his men, those who supported him, they're all dead now. And when the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley, and they that were on the other side Jordan saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled. And the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So the end of the life of Saul is also a tragedy for the entire nation of Israel. Those who were on the advancing front of the Philistine army just left. They fled their cities. They didn't stay to defend them or fight for them. They just got out of there. And in so doing, the Philistines occupied the land and took over the cities. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, so the Philistine army is going to go back through the battlefield and go to all the dead bodies on the battlefield and take anything valuable from them, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilboa. What does that say about Saul's endearment to the people? There was nobody in Israel that was even willing to go find the king and his sons and spare them this desecration. In fact, it gets even worse. Look at verse 9. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor. So much for not having your body abused, Saul. It's abused. They decapitated him, took his armor off, and sent into the land of the Philistines round about, to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. And so the Philistines are gloating that they had killed Saul. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth. So Ashtaroth is a false god, a pagan god, a heathen god that the Philistines worshipped. And they took Saul's armor, and like a trophy on a wall, they put it in this house, this temple of worship. And they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. And so again, further desecration of Saul's dead body. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose. Well, it's about time, isn't it? And went all night and took the bodies of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan, and came to Jabesh and burnt them there. They had already been terribly desecrated, and so they went ahead and took these bodies and just burned them down. And they took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh, and fasted 7 days to mourn for the death of Saul and his sons. The burning of the bodies would not be hot enough to consume and combust and pulverize the bones, so they had to take the remains of the skeletons and bury those. So what does that have to do with David? Well, it's going to be a turning point in the life of David now. In fact, 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1, now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David abode 2 days in Ziklag. So he hears about Saul. It came to pass on the 3rd day that, behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul with his clothes rent and earth upon his head. And so it was, when he came to David, that he fell and did obeisance. And so David doesn't even know what's happened yet, but he's about to find out. So even though chapter 31 of 1 Samuel had nothing to do with the life of David, it was important to cover that, because Saul has been such a problem for David, and now that problem is completely gone. How's that work for you? You ever worry about something? You ever get despondent and depressed? Oh no, it's over for me. It's all done. I may as well chalk it up. I'm a dead man. I'm a dead woman. Not necessarily. You're not done until God says you're done. And God did exactly according to plan what he told David he was going to do. David just dropped his faith too soon in what the Lord wanted to do. All right, that's all that I got for you. That is the 31st chapter of 1 Samuel, and that's the end of the book of 1 Samuel. I think we started all the way back in chapter 16, so almost half of the book there that we covered in the last 16 days, as a matter of fact. Thanks so much for watching. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.